instructions for your final project. First thing that you have to realize is that this is a 3-page paper, right? So it's not really a paper, as it says here, quote unquote paper. It's just a proposal for something that you could write that would be a lengthier paper. If anybody is interested in later on developing this paper, I am sure I'd be more than happy to work with you. But right now, I'm not asking you to fully accomplish that task. Okay? So this paper comes out of a lot of discussions that we have had during the semester. One of the reasons that makes ethics something relevant is this formulation that it's supposed to bring into existence a world that is more just, in which individuals thrive, in which I can take on whatever sort of identity I want as long as I don't impinge on other people's freedom to do the same, right? So ethics is always related to the creation of space, opportunities, futures, possibilities. Its foundations, as we have examined in class, might be a little bit shaky because we can't really pinpoint where this idea that ethics needs to exist comes from. But even in the smaller societies, even in the way in which we treat one another, we seem to have this idea that there are some practices that are worth having. And maybe we don't agree on what those practices are. But for ethicists, that idea that even in the way in which I treat one another, in the way in which I expect to be treated, that even those practices help us to establish the need for ethics, right? And then we have all the philosophical discussions we've been having in class, like where does morality come from? What does that mean for the way in which we do ethics? What does that mean for the creation of ethical systems? We had these ethical systems that come down with a maxim, and if you follow the maxim, they want to tell you like, hey, everything is going to be good, right? Because we're telling you exactly what to do. And then there are the other approaches that are a little bit more open-ended, where they're telling you to take care of the relationships in which you are, make sure that the way in which you're acting really defines the person that you want to be. And those are way more open-ended, right? But they're trying to do the exact same thing. How do we make of this world one in which we are happy inhabitants? We're flourishing, as Aristotle said. So, based on all those discussions, I want to see where you would take these discussions, right? Where do we go from here? So, that's why I have like there's a little bit of a trick from creative writing, not so much from philosophy, but trying to unite ethics to the concepts that are on this column. You need your basic thesis statement has to be about the 3 words that you're going to select, right? So ethics as, I'm pretty sure I would write something on like ethics as memory, right? The way in which we have acted towards other people, the things that we have done, the things that we have sworn not to do ever again, right? How we might fail that memory. Like those are projects that I'm already interested in. Ethics against justice. Is there a difference between what it means to be ethical and what it means to be just? Uh, Socrates had a lot of those discussions, right? And we actually see them right now in what our legal system uh, guarantees and what we think might be ethical. Think about the discussions we have had about torture, or way at the beginning when we were talking about the surfactant trial, the way in which the trial was conducted might have been within the ideas that the FDA has for what makes a trial a good trial, therefore just according to their ideas, but it may not be ethical if we consider other things that haven't been outlined by an ethical system, right? So the idea is that you need to generate a thesis by uniting, by talking about these three words, right? That should be the title of your paper, because then those three ideas you can explain them further on the thesis statement. Let's say that this is something that I want to do at some point. Ethics as amnesia, right? Because in the sort of studies that I'm interested in, countries develop these rich identities, who they are, how they position themselves, and they do this by forgetting how they got there. So when I write or when I examine texts that have to do with the dictatorships in Argentina or Chile or El Salvador, right? And the way in which those governments actually hired uh, advertisement firms in the US to make them to help them present themselves with a good face and forget about the people they had disappeared, forget about the people who were being tortured, right? Argentina has these really chilling stories about torture, where one of my favorites, because it's unbelievable, is that Argentina was under a military junta in 1976, and the World Cup was being played in Argentina. So one of the biggest stadiums in Buenos Aires was at the exact same time a center for torturing prisoners, political prisoners, and there was a match. So the tortured people were being torture like even more harshly during the games, because their screaming could be confused with the screaming of the people who were like enjoying a game above them. Part of this also happened in Chile, and the governments in those two countries work really hard to make people forget or want to forget about what had happened there, right? So, what's the relation between ethics and amnesia in countries that have undergone dictatorial governments? And you can relate this to anything that you want, something that we have discussed in class, something that has come up, something that has been on the news for the last few weeks, right? The idea is that these concepts interplay with one another, and then in your thesis statement you clarify what it is that you're trying to do. Using the assigned prompt, you're going to develop a statement that clarifies what you're going to do in the paper. If you're writing a paper on ethics as amnesia, maybe you want to use a utilitarian approach and social contract theory, right? Like if we're able to unite those two theories, can we create an identity that will, at the end, create a nation that is more integrated, and that integration will create this sort of differential process through which all the individuals thrive? Yes, it might be predicated on some faux pauses that the government did, but at the end of the day, we can't really think that there's any society in the world that is not guilty of alienating people or terrorizing others in order for their government to succeed, right? So these ideas here are supposed to serve as the prompt of the point that you want to drive in your would-be paper. And this would-be paper has to be represented, focused, based on some of the discussions that we have had in class. So you need to use different theories. You have to include three quotes of each one of the theories that you would use, at least two theories, there has to be a brief explanation of, oh my God, these quotes, sorry about that, um, and why could they be used as support of what you're saying, right? If I'm talking about the creation of just institutions, maybe I want to use a quote by John Rawls and just explain how that quote relates to the overall project. You don't have to write a whole paragraph about it. You just have to bullet point the quote and then maybe do a second bullet point, indent that, and talk about the way in which this quote would be used or how you think it relates to the project. Addresses the likely conclusion that your paper would have is a little bit tricksy uh, because you want to formulate a possible outcome of your paper, right? So you will demonstrate that yes, this possibility of like ethics as amnesia is actually something that more countries should embrace. Um, that ethics as forgiveness can never happen, right? Or that ethics and justice will never be fully equated. And you have proven that through the analysis of the different philosophers and philosophical theories that you have used. And the rest of the criteria here, um, you can actually forget about the MLA, sorry, the MLA your paper has to have a header, it has to have a title, it has to be double spaced, it has to have citations, right? So that's what I refer to by the MLA format. It has to be typed and it seems to be proofread, capitalize what needs to be capitalized, indent what needs to be indented, create paragraphs that are really supporting each one of the ideas. You don't really have paragraphs, you have bullet points, that's totally okay. Just make sure that you keep doing the header with your last name and page number, and that you have a double space 1 inch margin document. Um, it fulfills the assigned length. It shouldn't be longer than 3 pages in MLA format. So we are really talking about something that is short. And I know it says here that it was uploaded to ePortfolio, but you don't have to do this. You can just email it uh, to my Gmail account and I'll grade it that way, and that way I can give you feedback. Okay? Sorry for the stuttering. I got like really disconcerted about something that's happening in my office right now. So if this explanation doesn't make sense, make sure to send me an email. Send me an email to my Gmail account and I'll get back to you.